I'd like to welcome on my first guest, and he is, and by the way, this is supposed to be my chair, so I'm going to sit back here, and I'm going to play the Inappropriately Showbiz jingle now to welcome on my next guest. Wait, first I have to announce you. Steve is an artist, writer, philosopher and speaker who has no training or qualifications in any of these subjects. He's spoken around the world on the subject of creativity. He's sold art across 4 continents and exhibited alongside the likes of Picasso and David Shrigley. Steve's at his best when he has no idea of what's going to happen next. So perfect for tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Steve Chapman. See what you like. Thanks very much, Joao. Steve, you're an old hand with this. You're an old hand in this show. You've been. This is your 3rd chat show, and the 2nd time you've been a guest.
Second
right?
on a chair, yeah. It doesn't get any easier.
So you've seen us. You've seen the journey. You know, how was that for you to watch that bit that just happened?
I loved it because you genuinely didn't know, and for me, getting good at not knowing is at the heart of the thing you're exploring.
Okay.
Like whether anyone else enjoyed it, I don't know. But I did. It's like genuinely watching someone going, I am making sense of the world live with you, in front of you.
Yeah,
so I
it's a bit like that. Yeah. And why is not knowing important to your quest and your creativity?
Well, I think any of us...
By the way, sorry, I just want to point out, this is Steve's dog here. So
Yeah.
Steve brought some artwork, and that's it.
That's my dog.
That's Steve's dog.
That's all I could fit in my bag.
Steve's an artist as well as a creativity guru, and we'll say a bit more about his career in a bit, but go ahead.
What was the question again? I have no short-term memory.
I can't remember.
No.
Why is not
Right.
why is not knowing in public in front of your peers important?
Because that's creativity seems to be a bit of a thingified thing. So it's turned into a commodity, or it's something, or a formula. But to experience not knowing, if you make friends with that, that's what creativity is for me. Gestalt psychologists call it the fertile void. Making friends with a fertile void, that emptiness that only fresh stuff can come from. And that's why I genuinely say I'm at my best when I don't quite know what I'm doing. But there's an important thing here around just enough structure. So I know you. I don't think you're going to shame me and humiliate me. The audience look like they're not going to attack me, although I can't see right to the back. So there's enough structure for me to be okay with not knowing. And that's what I think lies at the heart of creativity. And it's why most businesses don't want to employ me, because they want to know what the answer is.
So I want to say a little bit about your career, because it's quite unusual in that you left school with 1 A level. Was it a D in geography?
There was actually 2, because the other one was a U.
Got it.
In A level law.
No one in your family had gone to university,
No.
and you didn't go to university.
No.
You went straight to a factory.
Yep.
You worked. It was a pharmaceutical factory. Was
Yep.
it making pills?
Yeah,
somewhere?
packing boxes.
Packing boxes,
of
and you
pills.
stayed in that company for 20 years.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
became, by the end of it, senior management in charge of, what was your title?
It was the
Director of-
meaningless job title was Global Director of Leadership and Organisational Development and Culture.
Right.
Which requires a business card like that sort of width, really.
Right. And that was because you were good with people and you knew how to talk to people and...
Yeah, and
liked
again,
people.
in hindsight, I genuinely didn't know what I was doing. Get a job in a factory, I'm interested in people, because factories are a brilliant place to go. Because, especially on the shop floor, there's just real human beings doing stuff, and there's no bullshit there.
But you felt empty and dead inside, or numbed. You said numbed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I did that. It was originally a stopgap. I'm just going to get a job in university. Yeah. I get a job in a factory because my mum and dad are asking me to pay rent now. I need some money. But that will just be a little aside until I get my job in radio or writing comedy or doing art, which sort of didn't happen really. So just in that role, keep getting promoted for being good with people. I get put in charge of problem teams. But the whole time, every time I got promoted, there was that little inner critic voice saying, they're going to look up and find out you've got a D in A-level geography. Heaven help them if they find out about this U in law, which ironically was the second best mark in our school, which shows the type of school I went to. And then I just kept getting promoted, but the whole time with that nagging self-doubt. And I think because you get rewarded for that type of thing, I was sort of trading what I call my natural wonkiness and creativity for acceptance. And it's alluring, isn't it? You get paid for it, you get promoted. So
what happened next? Something changed, you got involved with something different.
Yeah, I someone asked me earlier about this, saying how does a company develop people, or how did the company develop me? And it's an individual. It's an individual within a company. And I happened to work for a brilliant boss called Sally, who I speak about quite a lot on various podcasts and things. And she just, she had more confidence in me than I had in me. And she said, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know. She said, do you want to do an MBA or something else? And I said, I've no idea. An MBA sounds a bit like the stuff that I absolutely hate. So maybe I won't do that. And to cut a long story short, I did a lot of training in group dynamics, which involved a thing called a T group. I don't know if anyone's heard T group.
It's like an extreme therapy group, right?
Yeah.
I think you told me you were with the same group of people for 30 hours in a row,
it's 40,
without any stopping.
Yeah, 40 hours in a circle with 11 other people with no agenda.
And that changed your life?
That would be what I'd say if this was a TED Talk. And then that changed my life and go off and do one. But it's more gradual than that. I think it's just a slight nudge, a course correction of you can't help but ask yourself some fundamental questions about who you are in a situation like that. And I think it was then that I started thinking, I think I peaked in 1984 when I was 11. Because then I knew who I was and what I wanted to be. I was a bedroom DJ, I was a musician, I was an artist, I was a story writer, and I wanted to go to secondary school to develop those superpowers. But secondary school taught me they're not superpowers, they're distractions.
And now you've been crawling your way back to that, right? So you're now an artist, you've done a TED Talk, you've done an anti-TED Talk, you've got your own podcast.
Yeah.
Say a little bit about what you do now, your projects now, because they're pretty weird.
Good, thank you. That's one of the best compliments that I've had.
So just before we came up here, Steve took me downstairs and we recorded his podcast, which is called The Sound of Silence. Yeah. And I got to be silent with him for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was it. You've done it. You're going to do it 100 times, right? Yeah. And you've recorded David Shrigley,
Terry Waite,
Terry Waite. He must have been
Stella Duffy.
Yeah.
But all of that came from, I think it's, imagine if you're in a long-term relationship, which I was with my lack of sense of self in the corporate world. I think it's a reaction against that. So all of my work and all the stuff I'm interested in is, if I'm being polite, it's doing the opposite of what's normal. If I'm being blunt, it's fucking around with normality. Right. With what are the things that we regard as normal day to day? What happens if you do the opposite or a different option of that? What does that yield? So the podcast came out of my concern around what people are calling the attention extraction economy, the fact that everything is vying to buy our attention and distract us from the world around us and who we are. So it was just out on a run, which is where my ideas come from, and I thought, what would the opposite of a podcast be? A year and a half later, the 64th episode went out this week.
Yeah. So you like to do the opposite of things, don't you?
Yeah.
That's
so normally my start point, yeah.
So what would be your advice? Obviously I need a lot of advice, but what would be your advice when it comes to creativity? So I think what I struggle with, the struggle for me is day-to-day creativity is fine if someone needs me. If I've got a client or a project or someone's actually paying me, or not even paying me, just want me to do it, I can do it. Just write an article, fine. But if I have to, it's this solo creativity, just doing it myself. I long to do that. That sort of just stuff coming out of me, and it happens in bursts when I'm on holiday or I'm really relaxed, and I'd like to happen all the time. So how do I do that?
Go on holiday more sounds like a
right.
Yeah.
But
seriously, again, it's an interruption to routine and pattern, and possibly what you were saying in your introduction was quite moving, because maybe you're just trying too hard.
Oh, I'm definitely trying too hard.
Maybe you're seeking something that doesn't exist.
Yeah. But what would life be without seeking stuff that doesn't exist? I mean, that's my whole life. Right?
I think there's a difference between...
I'd have to let go of that, and then what would I be? Just Laurence?
Yeah, you'd just be like a blancmange.
Just a kind of sort of guy that people like, okay.
Yeah.
It just doesn't
But
really
never does
do
anything creative.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
You know, he was a nice guy.
Yeah. I think if you aspired to do that, to do the opposite of what your instincts are, then something
I
magical.
can't find my phone, but I did write down a conversation I overheard on the train coming up here. There was a guy walking past with his phone saying, "I just don't like him. I just don't like him. He's a nice guy. Don't get me wrong. But I don't like him. I don't like him. I think he's a liar.
Right.
But he's a nice guy. Don't get me wrong. I don't like him." Yeah. That was it. That was the whole conversation. Just reminded me of it.
I bet his phone wasn't even switched on.
So just being likable, that's not enough for me.
No.
And why is it so important? Why do you think creativity is so important to me? Why do I care
In brackets,
enough about
what's
it?
the answer?
Why do I care enough about it?
For me, it's without sounding too cliched. It's the purpose of all of this.
Yeah.
I don't often say this because it sounds like I'm being a wanky artist, but life's a conceptual art project.
This is the moment to start playing moving guitar music again.
Right, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
so you know.
You move me.
Just say that again.
Life is essentially, Laurence, a conceptual art project.
It's not very moving though.
No. But I mean that seriously. I don't know why I'm here or what the purpose is of anything.
But you seem above all, more than many people I know, which is why I admire you. You seem to be really at home with just playing and just doing that, and you're courageous as well. You turn down work when it's boring to you. You don't go off and teach the world about creativity, even though you're known for that, and you've been to big companies and you do that stuff, right? But you get bored and you just can't be bothered, and you've got a sort of authenticity, and I think that's something that I see in artists.
Well, and I think I will only do the work that that I'm going to enjoy, that instinctively feels like it's going to do something in this whole idea of unravelling what life is all about. I don't say that in pitches for work because no one would ever employ me. But I think if you just continue to do stuff that really doesn't enliven your spirit, you end up being dead inside. And I spent 20 years being dead inside, so I think I just managed to get enough CPR to revive that part of me.
Do you think most people are a bit dead? I mean,
this is relative. So this isn't saying that everyone that works in a regular job in a regular place is dead. I think the question for everyone is this me? Is this good? Is this okay? And if it's okay, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think people often mistake when they see my work and stuff like that there is an absolute comfort feel with all of it. Someone said to me the other day, how do you get as comfortable as you are with not knowing? And I said, well, that's not exactly true. I don't think there's a comfort level. Everything is always uncomfortable, but it's just a familiar discomfort. The same as I get costochondritis in my ribs, which is chest pain from inflammation. That's still really uncomfortable when I get it, and I don't like it, but it's familiar. So I think again, this myth of being totally comfortable it's a myth.
Well, that's fine. I'm not comfortable any of the time, so that's okay.
And I'd be asking, what is that discomfort offering you?
Yeah.
What's the gift of that discomfort? Yeah. That's where a lot of my stuff comes from.
Just last thing, because we're a bit over time, but what would be your sort of message or anti-message? So you don't like messages, do you? So what would be your non-message for our guests?
I like messages. I don't like giving answers and certain things. Yeah. I'd say both those things. Yeah, get really good at not knowing. How do you get really good at not knowing? And if the immediate question you say in response to that is how do I do that, then let that go as well, because that doesn't really help.
Nice.
And the other thing is James Victore is one of my favourite artists. I don't know if you know him. He's got a brilliant book called Feck Perfection that came out earlier this year. And I'd say I really take one of his phrases to heart, and it's really helped me, is the things that made you weird as a child make you great today. So nice. That's
Steve Chapman, round of applause, please.
Thank you.
So, thank you.